Emotions Matter, brought to you by Emaww.com. That's EMAWW.com, your solution for emotional intelligence. Welcome to the Emotions Matter podcast. This is John, and I am excited to have a dynamic guest, Nikki Pahliney, with us today on this episode. Nikki started her career in hospitality and achieved an MCert from Cornell University and her master's degree from Middlesex University in London at the early age of 22. After 7 years, she moved on to begin a successful career in recruiting. This led to starting a highly successful IT and finance recruitment company, which became the preferred recruiting partner for numerous blue-chip companies in South Africa. Nikki has also seen the painful side of business, enduring a nasty break in the relationship with her previous business partners. She then started again, building another 2 businesses from scratch and growing a team of previously unemployed and disadvantaged youths. She now focuses on assisting and uplifting young entrepreneurs and South Africans via her company, Minds in Sync, at www.mindsinsync.co.za. Welcome, Nikki. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, John. It's a privilege to be on this podcast.
Everything I have read about you speaks to a real desire to see other people succeed. This is a critical trait for people in both the hospitality and recruiting business. So why don't you tell us when you became aware of this passion and how did you go about developing it further?
So, for a long time, I was actually quite a selfish person, or not selfish, but a very competitive individual. As I was growing up, I always had to be the best and wanted to be number one. In anything from sport to academic achievements and sort of getting things done. However, I spent some time after I had finished high school in South Africa. I spent some time in the UK and then also a short stint in Washington, D.C. in the States. And when I came back, I kind of realized that there was so much more at home in South Africa that I had not been paying attention to. A lot of troubles, a lot of problems, particularly with our economy and with the number of unemployed people in South Africa. I was still finding my feet, and I managed to get into a recruitment company. At the time, they hired me. They saw my background in hospitality, and they said, well, this lady must know how to deal with people's nonsense because she's had to handle all sorts of fun and games from different customers in events and restaurants, etc. So during my time with that company, I learned a lot about myself because it was highly paced or fast paced, and at the time there was a young lady who ended up reporting into me. Long story short, I was a horrible boss to her. And I only realized, at the time, and it was because I was pushing myself so hard, that the impact it was having on her. Long story short, when I did end up leaving that company, she and I had become good friends by that point in time. And, coming back to your original question, it was a case of me realizing that I could come back to South Africa and I could provide a lot of value to those around me who have not necessarily been as crazy and as driven as I have, in just helping them to succeed in their own different and unique ways.
So you are a successful coach, a talent advisor, and a brand catalyst. Who did you look for coaching and guidance throughout your career?
So, John, there have been a couple of people. First and foremost is my father. My dad has always been an inspiration to me in South Africa. He now lives in Washington, D.C. in the States. But in South Africa, he was instrumental in implementing one of the international banking regulations in the first sort of time that it came into play, which I believe was 1987, 1988. And, he's always just said to me, anything is possible. If you want to try something or you want to do something, or you're thinking about an idea, sorry, Nike, but just do it. So that was always my dad's sort of approach to life. When I actually joined the recruitment company I mentioned in the previous question, there was a lady there who was my general manager. We didn't see eye to eye for a very long time, because I was the, driven, crazy salesperson who wanted to make lots of money and incredibly opinionated and total typical millennial. Yes, I do fall within that bracket. And, at the time, even though I didn't necessarily notice or realize it, she was incredibly instrumental in my growth at that point in time, because she helped me to understand what it means to listen to other people. So sort of talking to the recruitment aspect of my life and where my career has taken me, we as recruiters, and I say we in sort of quite general terms, we listen to people. We work with people. People are our product, and people are, our clients. So you almost play the role of a mini psychologist when you're working with an individual, and especially in the markets that I deal with, which are sort of highly specialist, quite niche individuals, strong mathematics backgrounds. And one of the things she always taught me was you just have to listen. So I would definitely say she's been quite a valuable person. And last but not least, my mom. Again, another person we haven't seen eye to eye with in many, many cases, because she and I are just as stubborn as each other. But she's especially in sort of life and love and relationships. She's been incredibly valuable in how she's helped me to deal with aspects of my personal life.
I picked up on something that you mentioned a minute ago. You said people are a product. Now, I've never heard anybody say that before. That's a really interesting statement. Can you jump into that just a little bit? People are a product. What does that mean?
It's an interesting statement, and to a lot of people, I'm sure it's a bit of a contentious statement, because, I don't think anyone really wants to be seen as a product. But that being said, and I'm going quite sort of philosophical here, but if you compare, the identity, and I know we're going to touch on brand, or I'm assuming we're touching on brand identity, but if you look at the identity that an individual has, there might be certain clothing, shoes, whatever the case as far as material possessions go, but then there's also certain individual traits about themselves that those people would identify with. And that is what makes them individuals. That is what makes them unique, because not every single person is going to have the same viewpoint on something. Everyone is, for lack of a better word, special in their own way, because they are, quite unique. I look at, for example, LinkedIn. It's one of my favorite, I don't know how to say this, one of my favorite hunting grounds for fantastic candidates. Every single person there is trying their best to be a product on display, to whether it's a line manager, whether it's a recruiter, or even just to put their own personal brand and personal identity out there. The world has become digital, and if you want to be noticed in this world, it's not the only way, but it's for a lot of people getting ahead in their careers, and specifically sort of the younger generation, you have to market yourself and market yourself as a product to some extent, in order to get noticed.
Great. Wow. That's quite telling. For sure. So let me ask you, in your work with young entrepreneurs, is there a specific methodology or discipline that you've adopted to structure your guidance with them? So
yes and no. There are a number of questions that I will ask individuals. So for example, I will have a first session with someone, and we will just basically go through who they are, where they are at their life, or where they are in their lives at this point in time, and what it is that they want to achieve. most of the time, nobody actually knows what they want to achieve. They have sort of a faint idea that they're not happy with something currently, or they want to improve on something, but it's still very much a figuring out process. So one of the steps that I do take is to actually start by performing my own assessment on them, if I can call it that, where I literally just go through a whole number of different questions just to find out what they're all about, what they've been doing up until this point, what do they see as their own personal strengths, their own personal weaknesses, what do they love about themselves, and what do they dislike about themselves. One of the biggest things for me in coaching is that a lot of people have very poor self-esteem or low self-esteem, and in coaching, it's very important to address that right up front, because if you want to enable someone to achieve and to get further in their lives, they're not going to go very far if they're still having, a lot of self-doubt. So number one is definitely addressing the self-esteem issue. And then number two is sort of helping them to map out kind of a plan where they want to go. Some people, it takes me months to work with them and perform coaching, and we have regular sessions, and sometimes I do feel like I'm a little bit of a psychologist. And then with other people, it's far more strategic. There was a lady that I dealt with who really wanted to sort of up her career, and was looking at progressing to a CEO position within a company over a period of, say, 5 to 10 years. And, at that point in time, I had to say to her, well, have you really figured out what goes into this? Have you thought about the fact that, number one, is your current situation, your current role that you're in, what skills are you gaining that you will actually be able to use one day in the role of a CEO? Or what skills are you gaining so that you can network with the right people? Because growing in business and in corporate, as I'm sure you know, John, is very much about playing the game. Mm-hmm. And climbing that ladder. And in order to climb that ladder, it's not just about what you do and being the best at your job, because then your manager will pretty much keep you where you are because he loves having a great resource. It's about building those networks and building those relationships. So that's a lot of what I sort of focus on in my coaching is helping to build up the individual, and then also helping to sort of grow their interpersonal interaction with other people around them in order to reach that next step in their career, learning who the strategic partners are.
The strategic partners within the organization.
Within the organization, or even within a friend network.
Gotcha.
You never know. You absolutely never know.
So what do you find, as you were mentioning, as you were talking through this, I'm thinking back through my 25-year career in the corporate world. It sounds like you work a lot with millennials. How do you find that they deal with the political environment of the corporate world? Okay,
so that's quite an interesting one. Some millennials absolutely thrive and love it. And, for them, it's incredibly competitive and exciting and to do it. And that's a whole different sort of breed of individual. But then a lot of the sort of individuals, I'm going to sort of talk to a bit of a loaded issue here, at least in South Africa. A lot of individuals, yes, millennials are very much about helping and saving the world and being better at, helping others and doing something that is significant. But at least in South Africa, we often have this sort of issue of entitlement amongst a lot of the youth. We've got a degree, we've got this, we've got that. Now we must get a job. And people must pay me because I'm so amazing, and everyone has told me how amazing I am throughout my whole life, which you are, as an individual, you are. But I think one of the things that millennials really struggle with coming into a corporate environment is the fact that there's often still a lot of old school thinking, a lot of hierarchy, and often, figuratively speaking, they get pummeled into submission, which doesn't bode well. And then a lot of them end up leaving the companies, going to another environment, or becoming entrepreneurs. And that's one of the things I actually love about my generation is a lot of millennials do become entrepreneurs because they want to do things their way.
It sounds like you've been through it. You recently had to spend a lot of energy in what I'm going to call a less than positive arrangement with a former partnership. It's pretty clear that your energy, dedication, and passion for helping others and growing a new business hasn't diminished in the least. So what can you tell our listeners about what it takes to keep moving forward, and specifically, how do you do it?
So, John, it was definitely a very difficult time in my life from sort of, I would say, beginning of 2015 until quite recently, and unfortunately it's still to some extent ongoing. I think that, initially I was very lucky. My survival mode kicked in. I realized that my business partners had been doing all sorts of fun things with the business bank account, and I had very little control at that time. So I had to, and then I also got kicked out of my own business, which was great fun. And I had to sort of pick myself up and go, well, I still need to earn a living. I don't necessarily want to work for a corporate, because I have seen, the sort of the culture, and I'm very much an entrepreneur through and through. So I just had to cry a lot. And, there were many sort of nights where my husband, he is also, I must say, I didn't mention him in my earlier, in the earlier question, but he's been the most amazing support anyone could wish for, because the situation in my life has, to some extent, was financially crippling, but fortunately we've got through it. And he's just been there for me. And, when I was having those tough moments, he would tell me to just breathe, stop, let's put together a list, let's look at what you can do, let's look at what's within your control, and then go, just do it. And yeah, it comes back to that whole philosophy of no matter what else is happening, you just got to keep on going.
So that's what drives you every morning. You just say, I've got to do it. You get up and just push yourself to move forward.
Yes. No, this morning, I actually, it's quite ironic we're having this conversation. I was actually dealing with quite a nasty situation in the one business, where one of my clients completely under-offered my candidate. And right from the start, instead of going, oh my gosh, this horrible client, what am I going to do? Damn them. I just said, okay, what can we do to fix this? Mm-hmm. It's not the end of the world. My candidate was in tears, and I just, I went into fix-it mode. And that was it, wrote down who do I need to speak to, what do I need to do, wrote a massive email to the relevant people that needed to be included, sent off the email, made phone calls, and I just did it. I know that for a lot of people it's not easy, but one of my coping mechanisms is to go, let me put this thing that is weighing down heavily on me, let me put it aside just for the moment, let me not let it go round and round in my head and keep me up at night. And let me look at the positive things that are happening in my life, because I can just get more and more positive energy from the good things that I'm doing and the ways in which I'm able to add value to other people's lives.
So what I've seen is you have the ability to coach and help people in what's called building a personal brand. Give our listeners some insights about building a personal brand.
So a personal brand has become quite a sort of prevalent thing, especially in society today. Going back to what I mentioned about LinkedIn in the earlier question, you've got, well, actually it's been going for a long time. If you look at Facebook, you look at MySpace, everyone's got their personal brand. The difference now, at least what I'm seeing from the work world perspective, is how critical your personal brand is to you getting that next job or making that next connection. So, for example, some of the times where I'm actually looking at some of the initiatives that I'm working on, there might be something that someone has put on a digital profile that they have that immediately says to me, I need to call that person. Whether it's from a recruitment perspective, whether it's purely connecting the dots between something or another, the fact that they've put that information online is fantastic, because then I can make that connection. But at the same time, having your personal brand is also, you have to be careful. And I'm sure that everyone has spoken about this issue to death. It is quite scary. If you put too much information online, for me, a personal brand is it's about the information you put online, but it's also about the person you are. So how are you acting towards other people? Do your actions match what you're saying? Or are you, we all know those people that sit in the front row at church, but at the end of the day, they're actually not always the nicest. Are you actually saying one thing and doing another? And that's really all it is about, is if you're going to have a personal brand, going back to, having that online personal brand, what are you putting out there? And are you actually following up? Are you living up to those expectations? Because anything you put out there, you're setting an expectation of yourself, which other people will hold you to. Some people go as far as to have massive online profiles, posting things every day, putting things out there. I'm sure everyone knows, or I'm sure especially in the States, everyone knows about PewDiePie and all the fun and games he recently went through with some of the things he said that he should not have said. It's so easy. It can take you years. It can literally take you years to build a brand and to have followers and to have people that you're connected to who, they want to be connected to you because you are a person of influence for whatever reason. It doesn't have to be because you're the smartest person. It could just be because you're a person that tweets or, posts amazing things about the environment, for example. But that brand can so quickly be destroyed if you do not match your actions to your words. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with the personal brand. And then on the career side, it's really about, is what you're putting out there what a future employer actually wants to see. And if there are things that don't seem to make sense or don't add up, that can have really bad consequences for your future. There was actually, and sorry, this is the last point I'm going to make, but there was a study that was actually done in the US, and I'm trying to remember who it was by. I was reading about it the other day, and 60% of employers look at what any sort of social media presence that you have online before they decide to hire. And that was based on US data. Mm-hmm. Now, in South Africa, we're not yet there, but that is why your personal brand is so important.
So do you find that the personal brand, if I'm starting my own personal brand, do you believe that from an emotional perspective, it's built out of a desire to be something, or it's built out of a craving to get to a certain status? What do you think is the driving factor, or do you think there's multiple driving factors for a person that begins to build their own personal brand?
I do think there are multiple driving factors. Each individual is different. So I think when I started building my personal brand, a little part of it was definitely because I wanted to be recognized for being a thought leader in the things I do. But another part of it was really just because I wanted to share my viewpoints. I'm a very vocal person. And I there are a lot of things that I am incredibly passionate about and have become even more passionate about. And building my personal brand allowed me to start interacting with a certain type of community of people who share the same values and the same thoughts. And from there, it's just grown. I mean, my career has accelerated. I'm so happy in my personal life because I kind of have this insight and knowledge into what is always happening and the things that I'm interested in. On the other hand, I also look like I'm an incredibly knowledgeable person, which is really not a bad thing. It may sound a bit self-centered, but at the end of the day, everyone will have a different reason for doing it. I love sharing the knowledge. I love hearing people's feedback, and I love being able to talk about things that are relevant to myself, but also going again to my sort of my product, my people product, relevant to them. Because in order to work with individuals from a recruitment perspective, you have to be able to speak their language. I could never expect someone to work at, for example, Apple, and not be able to tell me a single thing about what their product is actually about and what they do. And that's also part of the things that make up my personal brand and my personal identity, is the fact that I'm passionate about not only my candidates, but what they do, and understanding what they do, and sharing what they do, and learning more about it, and being able to have those conversations. So going back to your question, there are definitely many reasons. It could be because of, personal reasons, personal growth. It could be because of wanting to be recognized for any particular thing, or it could just purely be from an interest perspective.
So young leaders today, and you touched on this a little earlier, so young leaders today stay constantly connected, and what I see, they probably need a little help with social media management. Give us what your insights are in the social media management area. How do you help people with that?
It's quite an interesting field because it's a massive sort of, from an electronic perspective, it's a massive developing industry, the whole social media management. I know that in the US there are jobs where you can post things for different clients to their different profiles online. Social media management is very much about how are you making sure that message that you are putting out there to, your audience, for lack of a better word, and how is it being received? Because it's one thing to put out 10, 20, 30 articles over, say, a week, but not have any engagement, versus putting out information, seeing who's looking at different things, responding, being engaged. There's a lot of these sort of bots out there from a social media perspective that will like everything that everyone is doing, that will follow everything that people are saying, and will just connect left, right, and center. Mm-hmm. That's not social media management. That is a computer-generated program that is following everything. The person on the other end doesn't have actually a clue what what you're all about and what your life's all about, or their connections, or at least that's my opinion. So social media management is about, going back to the whole personal brand thing, it's about how you are communicating your brand. And there are many wonderful and amazing tools that you can do that with, so that you are sending sort of corresponding messages on different platforms. One of the ones I love and use a lot is Hootsuite, because I use that for scheduling a lot of my posts. But then at other random times, I will just post something because it looks interesting, or I'll engage with something or someone because it's interesting. The other aspect of social media management is, are you going to create your own content? Because that's always a tough one, and that's very time consuming. Or are you going to be sort of looking at what other people are doing and incorporating and sharing? So there are many elements to sort of the question of social media management. As far as leaders go, if you are a leader making use of social media management or social media as such, you probably want to be sharing what other people you look up to are sharing, because that is also a very important way in which people then associate you with that person, or with their sort of belief and philosophy. If you're going to be putting up things which are not, and I'm not going to mention names, but are not the most lovely individuals in the world, and relevant to those people, then obviously from a social media management perspective, you're building a profile or building sort of things around yourself which are not necessarily going to get the most positive feedback and response from whomever it is you're trying to reach. So I hope I've answered your question. I went a little bit off track there.
No, you actually were right in line. I've noticed, recently in the U.S. there, with our most recent political environment that happened here recently and is still going on, you've got a lot of individuals who have become very passionate about what they post online. And my fear, and I think it's already been pretty much proven, that, people do look at your social media postings, and you can basically post yourself to unemployment. You can say and do things online that, a potential employer or your current employer can find questionable or undesirable from their perspective, and they don't want to be associated with people who are posting, let's just call it, politically incorrect. And I hate to use that term, but items that are too far on one direction or the other direction, which might reflect badly on either their company or your employer or, you know, people that they associate with, et cetera. I don't know whether you found that to be the case or had to coach people around their social media profiles, et cetera.
Very much. You know, it's anything from being too sort of flagrant, if I can say, on your social media, especially girls with going to different events and parties. The individuals I work with are generally your sort of mathematicians, your actuarial type of individuals. They are seen as being seriously uptight and professionals, and you know, for them to then look, it's obviously their lives. It's up to them what they want to put out there, but I can guarantee you that if your employer is looking at your, say, social media profiles, and there are just lots of pictures of you partying and drunk, it's not going to go down well. And especially some of the major companies that we have here in South Africa that employ these types of individuals. I mean, you're looking at banks, you're looking at your big four in terms of the audit firms, so your Deloittes, your KPMGs, PwCs. They're not going to want to hire people that don't necessarily fit in with what their corporate culture is and their corporate image is. I mean, with a lot of those companies, for example, they list a lot of their employees on their websites. Now, say now you go and look for, let's say, Jack Smith, and Jack Smith has a profile on KPMG's website, and you can see he's this manager in this and this background. And then, oh, wait, there's his Facebook profile. Let's go look at his Facebook profile. And you see that there's a picture of him, and he has just vomited, and his friends have taken a picture. That is definitely. And the worst part is I've seen that. And I've actually had to say to my candidates, you really need to take these things down, because the fact that you still even have a job is pretty amazing. So, and I mean, there was another situation, a gentleman who was one of the most senior economists at one of our local banks, called Standard Bank. And I think it was last year or the year before, he said something which was politically incorrect and to some extent racially motivated. And let's just say within 24 hours, he was already out of the building. So yes, what you put online will definitely impact your future and your career.
Great wisdom, great warnings. Let's move on. We actually have a question from one of our listeners, which I'm sure you're going to have a great answer for. It comes from a guy named Stuart. Stuart is 28 years old and works as a team leader at a large tech company in the UK. His question is, we are a growing and dynamic company, and I regularly get new employees added to my team. My biggest problem is getting them adjusted to our workplace and getting them motivated. What do you recommend?
John, I would say it's if you're bringing on board new people, the first thing you need to do is to already be spending time with that individual before they even start and getting them into the team. Some of the hires that I've been involved in, for example, I've literally facilitated breakfasts with the entire team, getting the people together so that they can start getting to know this individual. One of the scariest things about starting a new job is that feeling of being alone, being isolated. You've just left, if you're coming from another job, you've just left sort of a comfort zone, and now you have to make it work. There's a young lady who I'm working with, who I placed during the course of last year, for example, who has had a real struggle sort of fitting into the environment, and it's taken a lot of back and forth, a lot of coaching as well with her, to really be able to talk to her manager about some of the frustrations and the struggles she's been having. Whereas that could have been mitigated a lot better, if there had been far more interaction beforehand, far more clarification of expectations. One of the things that, especially because you mentioned that Stuart is in a tech company, I know that with tech companies, the software development or tech development is generally done in cycles. And if they're using a certain methodology, it's things like every 1 to 2 weeks. So in those particular situations, then you get the whole team involved. You bring that individual in, you make their opinion feel valued, you get them involved. I mean, even if you give them a little bit of a heads up as to what's going to be discussed in the meeting before anyone else knows, just so that they can actually seem like they know what they're talking about. You know, you want to give the individual coming into the new environment as much of an advantage and a chance to get going, not favoritism, definitely not, but a chance to really sort of get involved and, you know, for the team to see the value that they can bring to the table, whilst also making sure you're also looking after the team. So it's a tough one, but my thing is, anything where you're getting everyone involved and you're making sure that everyone else is heard. And as a manager, it's really about, or team leader, it's really about facilitation, rather than being the person that's kind of ordering everything to be done this way and that way. And each person has their role to play, and that they are appreciated for what they bring to the table. Those are kind of the number of key things that I think that Stuart could look at doing.
Those are great insights, and I'm sure it's going to help Stuart a lot. Get the whole team involved is what I heard you say. Yeah, get everybody involved. Yeah. Terrific. So you have a new ebook that's about to be published, and it's called, well, I'm going to say #HireMe, or do you just say hire me?
So it's #HireMe.
Okay, #HireMe. Tell our listeners about this exciting new publication.
This book, John, it came about because in my sort of specialization, one of the things that a lot of my candidates have said to me over the years is, no one's ever told you how to search for a job. You finish university or college, and you know the very next thing is, I need to go and impress an employer. How do I impress that employer? Yes, there might be 1 or 2 articles about interview tips, about this, about that, but and this book is quite relevant to the South African context, but there are a lot of sort of aspects of the job hunt or the job search process, which a lot of people just don't realize, particularly things like how to negotiate salary, how to handle certain types of questions, not making decisions when a potential employer is putting you under pressure, doing your homework, again going back to the sort of coaching element, which is doing your homework, talking to your networks, identifying people who could give you the inside scoop as to either what's happening in a company and where projects are coming from, where there could be opportunity for you then to, get in, make your mark, or start even just having conversations. This book is really the sort of how-to guide for young professionals starting in the job industry and or at their sort of second or third job, and taking that whole process through right till the very day they start their job. They get onboarded, they do all the documentation that's required, and then further development, whether it's skills development, all the fantastic online courses that are available, or whether it's, further studies from a university perspective. So that's kind of in a nutshell what #HireMe is all about.
So it looks like you've already got a lot on your plate, but let me ask you something. What else should our listeners be on the lookout from Nikki?
Yes, I never stop. And I rarely sleep, so I do have quite an exciting, let me call it, venture on the horizon. There is a concept which I started, or an initiative which I started just over a month ago. It's not as much on my LinkedIn, but, well, I suppose there are some things there, but it's very much been, or has taken off on my Facebook, and that it goes hand in hand with my book, #HireMe, and that is called #HireAgrad or #HireAgraduate. That initiative, it's kind of my CSI or CSR, corporate social responsibility initiative, where I've built an entire business model around giving back to the youth, particularly in the market that I already work in, which is the analytics world, and helping to train up individuals who cannot find jobs. Going back to sort of unemployment stats in South Africa, we're sitting at an unemployment rate of like 27%, which is just ridiculous. And of that are degreed candidates or individuals who, young underprivileged kids who have finished, well, sometimes not even underprivileged, but young kids who've finished degrees. At any point in time, there are at least about 10,000 of these individuals on the job market in my field, in the whole mathematics, statistics, actuarial, engineering, IT. I mean, those are the fields that are the future, and yet we've got unemployed individuals. And one of the let's call it an opportunity that I have identified is that there is this massive gap in the market between what these individuals are studying and doing at university and then making them employable so that they can get jobs in corporate environments. Because I have clients that are crying for the right resources in analytics, and analytics is also still very much not a new thing, but it's still very much a developing concept. I know in the States it's been going a lot longer than in South Africa. My sort of approach is to create a workforce of analytics individuals entering the job market. And I'm actually at the moment in talks with one of the largest tech software providers in the world about sort of sponsoring this opportunity. And then also with a couple of the local banks, getting them involved in, guaranteeing employment for the individuals and providing crash course learning, getting people from an international scale coming to South Africa, helping these kids to learn and to develop and training them up. I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm literally doing this of my own accord. And then getting the companies in South Africa to then guarantee that employment once they've been trained. So that's #HireAgrad.
Sounds like you've got a lot of initiatives headed and a lot on your plate. Nikki, I want to really sincerely thank you for being my guest and wish you the best of luck on your new ebook, #HireMe.
Thank you so much.
You can follow and find out more about Nikki at her website, mindsinsync.co.za, as well as Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. This is John, and I look forward to being with you again on another episode of the Emotions Matter podcast.